So, you want to write drill. Chances are you've stumbled upon this video and my guide on my website because you're looking to get started in writing drill. Maybe you're a high school band director, maybe you're a color guard director or a percussion director or a band staffer, or a college kid that just absolutely loves marching band and what you've learned from it and how it influences kids and all the wonderful things that it creates for young people. This video and the guide is kind of a crash course, something that's each section of it would probably need to be expanded upon. But I thought I'd put as much of it into an easily digestible guide as I possibly could. When you're done reading this guide and watching this video, you probably won't be ready, if you've never done it before, to write a drill, but hopefully it will put you on the path towards learning and practicing those things that you need to do in order to be successful doing it. So the first thing you need, obviously, is drill writing software. I use Pyware. There's others out there. In the guide, there's a free demo if you don't already own the software. If you choose to write drill for a band and have a client, or maybe it's your own group, you should pay for Pyware and make sure you have a nice paid for full version of the software. And then I also offer a course in how to use the software in case you haven't done that already. All right, so planning your show. You're going to want to collaborate with your entire staff because those people who have dedicated themselves to teaching your kids deserve an opportunity to come into that meeting and bring some ideas to the table. And you just might find that their ideas are fantastic and would really serve the kids well. The next thing you're going to want to do in that meeting is discuss what level each section is at. The whole band might be at a level of maybe A class or open class, but you could have some sections that are at different levels. You could have a wind section that's very talented and could play more open class music, more challenging music, whereas the color guard may be more of an A class or percussion A class, or exactly the opposite. It's important to pick your level at where your sections are, because when you write drill for those sections and you pick music and you plan everything out, you'll want to make sure to A, tailor it to your group's level so it's appropriate, and B, play to your strengths. You want to make sure that those kids that are have some of those higher level skills get the kind of demand that they love out of marching band. And the other students who maybe are at a little bit lower level can feel comfortable performing the skills that you write for them. Once you've got a show picked, you definitely want to create a broad storyboard of the show. It doesn't have to be super minute yet, just a storyboard for each movement of the show and how you want things to flow. Some years it's going to be something very simple. Other years you may have more of a storyline or a character, maybe something more literal, and you really need to plan it out, and it's very important. One thing that I found in my experience as a drill designer is that in those meetings, they listen to the music and they look at the ideas that are being presented, and they can already hear the amount of counts and the amount of pages and the amount of music needed to develop and pull off an idea. That's one thing that you'll learn over time as you get into writing that is very important. You'll want to do something or 10 things in one movement and you realize you only have enough time to do 2 of them. So it's really one of those skills as a drill designer that over the years you get better at, being able to listen to that music and say, we need more time to develop this idea. The next thing that can really help when you go to write your drill is to set your parameters for your group. Parameters are just anything that you can tangibly write down to help you to remember while you're writing drill. For winds, it could be taking into account how large the wind group is. If there's a large group of winds, maybe 50 to 100, you're going to want to visually make sure they're in a good place to be heard. If you have a lot of winds, over 100 winds, you could probably use a little bit more of the field. A smaller group, 25 to 50, you may want to use props or something to shorten the field. Knowing how many winds, and especially even subsections, how many woodwinds and how many brass, and you'll want to make sure that at those moments, those correct moments, they're in the right place to be heard. So taking into account your parameters there are very important. Also, you want to come up with parameters for students who are playing the melody, students who are playing the harmony or the rhythmic support, and the demand on their feet. I've had bands that say, if anybody's playing the melody, I would like them to be marching forwards or halted. Or if they are marching backwards or reshaping, try to keep it at a, no larger than a 12-5. I think those parameters work really well. And that way, when I'm writing the drill, I can really think through that. And when I write and make my notes, I know that those sections playing the melody need to have the demand a little bit lowered just to make sure that they can sound great while they play those melodies. And you want to develop parameters for all the other sections as well. Color guard, of course, you want to figure out your subsections. Are we going to have weapons? Are we going to have any sections that are all dance, or maybe sections that are 6-foot flag or 7-foot flag or swing flag? All of those pieces of equipment require a color guard to have a certain amount of space around them so that they can perform safely and then also effectively, so that those large flags are spread out enough to take up the whole field or take up the whole area and really be effective. Drumline as well, you want to make sure that their intervals, you come up with some parameters there. A lot of times bass drums and tenor drums don't like to go any smaller than a 3-step interval left to right, because they need that extra space, they need that room to breathe a bit so they don't run into each other or their drums don't hit. Whereas snares can get a little bit closer, 2 steps, sometimes even 1.5 if there's some sort of effect that you're trying to do. So it's important to set your parameters before you begin writing, and get your input from your staff members too. Sometimes if you ask your staffers at your meetings, they'll say, last year we were at such a close interval to the winds, or we were really close, we had some pass-throughs and some issues there. Can we talk about some things, some parameters where we know that we'll always get the right kind of drill that we're looking for? And that's where our parameters come in. They're really important. All right, now let's talk about a little bit about general effect. Now this is obviously a very artistic thing, something that a lot of people have different views on, but generally you should be listening with your ears and seeing something with your eyes and trying to create visually on the field what you're hearing. And if you match those things up, a lot of times you will have success competitively. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be that way, because effect can be created through choreography, effect can be created through color, and effect can be created, obviously effect is created by the music, but essentially the drill needs to have an effect of its own. And your job is to try to put the students in that situation where they can create the proper effect. And like I said, sometimes that will be through the actual marching and where they're going and the velocity of it all. But sometimes it's, can just come down to halting and moving side to side and doing choreography. So it's important for you as a drill designer, when those moments do come up where maybe what you're writing doesn't necessarily match, that you put in your notes, this is what row 1 should do, row 2 should do, row 3, so that the proper effect can be created. Those notes are very important for you or for the director of the group that you're writing for, so that the proper effect can be created. All right, so let's talk about the next step. The next step is planning your drill in a macro sense. Literally just going through every movement, every rehearsal letter, beginning to A to B, B to C, and just writing down this general storyboard. And you may have already done it in that first meeting with the storyboard, but having those initial thoughts and being able to see the production from top to bottom on one page is very, very important for you as a designer, because you have to know where you're going. And also you may want to set some parameters for yourself. We only would like to learn 40 to 45 sets of drill, or we're okay going up to 65 sets of drill or more. This large storyboard first is really important. And you can say from the beginning to letter A is 8, 8, 16, 16, and 12, hold 24. And you know that that's about 5 or 6 pages plus a hold. So in that chunk, you would write down all the general things that you need to accomplish within that chunk. Introduce the main character in the color guard, or set up the woodwinds who play, these really fast runs up front with the pit, while the rifles do really fast, exciting work. Just general things that you can make sure that you hit your targets for every chunk. What you'll find is that having that broad whole show view will keep you from overwriting, and it will keep you on track and on task for every section to make sure that you hit your checklist, that you know that you've accomplished all of the ideas that the staff put forward. Or it will put up a red flag for you. I don't think we're going to have enough time to develop this idea. And then you can go back to the staff or the music writer, or maybe just consider, well, maybe we could add some percussion here or something here to extend this so we could get this idea to have some more time to breathe and to come to life. All of this broad planning is very important in the beginning. Next, of course, you go into the micro planning, and this is where you write down every single page for every movement. 8 counts, 8 counts, 8 counts. What is every section doing? Now, when you're writing it, it's all going to seem very clear and organized. And then when you actually get into the drill writing portion of it, you may find some of the stuff that you wrote there, you have a hard time getting in. Don't worry. Try your hardest to get to everything, but you may notice that as you're going, you may need to modify some things a bit. Always, of course, trying to hit your general large targets, but those micro ones are important. And here's why. The micro stuff helps you to plan for what's coming next. Because we have silk changes, because we have soloists, because we have these days props and people who need to either move them or get onto them, there's a whole lot of thinking ahead that needs to happen. And the planning prior to writing is where this all happens. So writing those things down, giving yourself 3 sets prior to when that thing is supposed to happen, and typing it or writing it in your plan to say, flute soloist leaves for prop. That way, when you get there in the drill, you can take that flute player, you can move it over to the prop, you can get that person there, and then you know that when the time comes and they're supposed to come up and play the solo or do the thing that they're going to do on the prop, they're in the proper place. And that's why the micro planning is super important. One other thing I like to do when I'm micro planning is I like to find all of the large impact moments or holds, and I like to sketch out a picture of what I want that to look like. I usually make the form on a piece of paper. I have a sketchbook that I keep next to me, and I write it out, and I just try to think in my head these snapshots of the show and where those moments are. And then my job as the drill writer is, creatively getting them to those spots. And usually now that I've been writing drill for so long, I can hit those targets a whole lot better, my hand-drawn ones, because I've been doing it for a while and because I can think through what I'm going to do before I do it. Up front for you, it may be a little more challenging if it's your first drill, but I recommend that you at least have an idea in your head of every one of those large impact moments. All of this work on preparing and planning, it's time to get into Pyware. Remember though, you can't skip that planning piece. It's super important. Failing to prepare is preparing to fail. In my guide, you can see Pyware is the next step, opening up your Pyware, getting your file set up, watch the videos and follow along and make the OGG file to sync the music. And I like to go ahead and I like to sync the music. I like to add my measure numbers. I like to put a lot of my information into the drill before I even start it, because when I'm done writing the drill, I don't want another hour and a half of typing all that up. While I'm fresh, while I have the energy, that's usually when I write all that information into the production sheet. Now for me, the next thing I like to do is create my groupings. I usually total up how many woodwinds, how many brass, and I think of, what kind of block forms can I make? What kind of solid dense form? Can I make a wedge? Can I make pairs, trios? quartets, quintet, how can I split them up in how many different ways so that I can use those techniques throughout the program as ways to highlight any of the sections I've got going. I like to make sure that I have my rifles. How many rifles do I have? If it's 9, they can be in a 3-3-3. They can be in windowed 5-4. They can do all these different ways of creating them. I've got some groupings and some other things on my website that you can download, but that's kind of the thing I'm talking about. Knowing those small groupings can really help you when you get to the writing phase. Another thing that I like to do is create an entire band block form, or winds and drum line, or brass and woodwinds block. Can they make a block? Are we more of a rectangle? What type of full dense form can I have? And then that way I know before going into the drill what size that is. That's a 10 by 5, or that's a 4 rows of 16, this sort of thing. So if I have that all written down and I have that in my head, I know that I can go to that when it's time to put the band in a full dense form. So let's talk about writing methods, because a lot of times, and you may have found this already if you have Pyware or you got the demo and you've been practicing, is how do I get started? For me, I usually find the very first impact point, and then I create that set, and then I'll work backwards to the beginning. I have a video in my handbook and my guide that you can click on about how to write backwards in Pyware. But if that's something that's challenging for you up front, of course, start with page 1 if you'd like and make your way to your first impact moment. Usually that first impact moment is one that's a challenge to write. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's very clear of how to begin. And nowadays, now that I've been writing for a long time, starting a show and getting into it is not as challenging as it used to be. But when you're looking at that blank slate and you can literally put anybody anywhere you want, sometimes that can be really intimidating. So having an idea of your first impact moment and then rewinding from there is really important. So the backwards method works really well. And there's elements of the backwards method that are going to be a part of your drill writing for every chunk that you write, because you're going to write and write and write, and then you're going to go, oh, this is where I'm going, and you're going to need to rewind sometimes and smooth things out and make it better. So that backwards and forwards feel to the writing process is something that you're going to find as part of the process the whole time. If it's not, then maybe you're going to experience some times where kids are moving really fast, then slow, then fast again, and where you could have gone back and you could have made some of those moves a little bit smoother for them, or some of those transitions easier. Massaging those transitions from one impact to the next in the development is something that I think every drill designer does. So the backwards method isn't just starting and then writing backwards. It's also a part of every chunk that you're going to write. I usually write with the other method, which I call the important section method. So you figure out who is the most important thing in this next chunk, whether it be color guard or drum line, or whether or not we're drawing attention to this prop, or we're moving this thing, or somebody's going to toss and catch, or whatever the most important part of that next chunk is, and you move that and create that first, because that is the most important thing, and then everything else should be designed around that. A lot of times, that's a great way to move ahead, and then you know that the most important part for each chunk was given that space to do what they need to do and to become the focus. And then everything else you can design around that so that that becomes the focus. That is, I would say, probably 95% of what I do when I'm designing from chunk to chunk to chunk in a movement. The most important section method, I think, is the most important way to write. But like I said, that backwards method should be all a part of it as well, because you should always be going forward and backwards through your chunks to make sure that everything is flowing properly. Finally, you'll want to finalize your drill, of course. You can look at some of my videos on how to do that, but having a clear file and a clear system for delivering that information to the students is incredibly important. Please don't skimp on that process. Getting the right information on coordinate sheets and on the right drill charts for your students is incredibly important. Take the time to add the animations to the video that you're going to create. Show the video of the show and Pyware to your students. Use that software to its fullest ability. If you have the ability to do Ultimate Drill Book or some of these digital ways to deliver that drill to your students, do that for them. It makes such a big difference. I hope this guide has been somewhat eye-opening for you. If you're still not necessarily ready to jump in and write drill for your own group or for a group that you maybe teach, you should definitely use some of these things that are in this guide to practice with. Just take a music score, take an MP3 that you've used, or maybe it's part of a show you've already done. Go through this process. Write these parameters down, create an entire drill from beginning to end for that movement, and step back from it and look at it and say, did I accomplish all the goals that I set for myself? Because we all know that if there's one thing that band has taught us is that practice makes perfect. Go through these processes, read these guides, and one day it's going to be scary, but you might take that next step and commit to writing that drill for your very first group. If you ever need anything, I'm only one email away, drilldesignSolutions@gmail.com. I would be happy to help. Thanks a lot.